In the last video, we wrote a pretty good amount of code and we still have a pending error message on the screen. I want to first start off by talking about what we did here on line 33 when we created a new struct. So let's break down this line and make sure that we really understand what's going on with it. All right, so here we go. At the very left-hand side, we have the word request with a capital R. This is a reference to the struct that we had defined at the top of our contract. The word request right here tells Solidity that we are about to create a new variable that is going to contain a value of type request. Immediately after that, we create the new variable. So this is the name of the variable that we created, and its name is new request. Notice that this doesn't have to have the word request in it at all. It obeys all the same rules as normal variables. So it could have just as easily been like orange or elephant or ABCD, whatever we want it to be. But definitely a variable name of new request makes a lot of sense right here. So taken together, on the left-hand side of the equals, these two words mean I want to create a new variable called new request, and that variable is going to hold a value of type request. Now everything on the right-hand side of the equals is much more concerned with actually creating an instance of a struct. So the left-hand side is a little bit more about storing that value. The right-hand side is about actually creating it. So to create a new instance of a struct, we place the name of the struct, a set of parentheses, a set of curly braces, and then inside there we iterate all over the different fields that we want to initialize this request with. In the last video, when we were listing out all the different fields, you saw me pause for a little second right before we define the complete field. So if we take that back out, so let's delete that for a second, you're going to see that we get another error message here added to the list of the two that we already had. And let's see, the second one, I can't move my cursor, but the second one down, the one that says type error, it says wrong argument count for function call, 3 arguments given, and then the rest of that line probably says something like but expected 4. So whenever we create a new request, we have to place every different property that the request is going to be initialized with. So at the very top, we had said that the request has a description, value, recipient, and complete. So it expects 4 different fields to be defined. But if we only do description, value, and recipient, we're only providing 3 of those fields. So that's why I hesitated there for a second. And yes, we definitely do need to specify the Boolean complete like so. And so once we add on all 4 fields, that error message went away. And we only have the other 2. And again, we'll discuss those 2 in just a moment. Now there's something else I want to mention about declaring structs as we did right here. So specifically declaring the struct on the right-hand side. We used a key value pair approach to defining the struct. However, there is another way of defining a struct that does not involve all the keys listed out. So we don't have to always list out description, value, recipient, and complete. So this is an alternative syntax. I want you to be aware that you can use this alternative syntax, and you will sometimes see it used in a lot of blog posts and documentation. However, I very, very highly recommend you do not use this alternative syntax. Okay, so I'm going to show it to you so you know what it is. I highly recommend you not use it. So the alternative syntax would be to say simply request, then description, value, recipient, and false. All right, so what do we just do here? So this little segment right here could be used as a replacement for this block right here, specifically everything on the right-hand side. So both the highlighted portion right here and this highlighted portion right here both declare a new value of type request, which is a struct. The difference is that right here we're defining all the different fields and the respective values. Down here we provide only the values. So the word description is not the field name. Description right here is coming from the argument list. And then we have value that comes from the, I'm so sorry about that scrolling. I know it's really annoying. It is the code editor. I won't click on that line anymore. So we've also got value, which is coming from the argument list. We've got recipient, which is from the argument list. And then clearly this very last argument right here makes it very obvious that these are all values because we pass in false, which is supposed to represent complete. So again, these two syntaxes are completely equivalent. The second one right here, however, works in a very tricky way. So you'll notice that I very clearly did not specify which value belongs to which field. right? Like I say nothing in here that says, oh yeah, this value false right here is supposed to be assigned to the complete field. So that alternative syntax is all based on having a consistent order of fields. So you see up here where I define the struct, we said description, value, recipient, and then complete. So when we use this alternative syntax, Solidity assumes that the first argument will be used for the first field defined in the struct. The second will be for the second value, or the second field defined in the struct, recipient for the third, and false for the fourth. So it's all about the order in which we list out these fields right here. And when I say that, maybe you will very quickly get a sense of why I very highly recommend not using that syntax. Well, here's why. I'll give you a very obvious example. If I reorder the fields inside this definition right here, like let's say if I move bool up to the top, what's going to happen? Well, now everything shifts by 1. The first value that I pass into the request with that alternative syntax should be a Boolean. So if we now go down to the bottom, you're going to see an error message. And the error message is talking about the types of all these different fields that we are passing into the request struct right here that we're trying to create. So it's saying, hey, you're trying to pass in a string that is supposed to be a Boolean. You're trying to pass in a value that is trying to be a string, and so on. So it basically reorders the order of arguments in there. I could get that error message to go away by moving false up to be first, like so, and now you see that error goes away. So I feel like, you can very quickly understand how someone might decide to do a little bit of a refactor to your code, and they'll say, oh, you know what? I want to see all my Booleans defined up top rather than at the bottom. That's a really easy refactor for someone to do, and if they did that, they would then very suddenly break a bunch of your code. Now in this case, it wasn't that bad because you and I clearly saw that we got some error messages. However, imagine for a second that the entire struct had all the same types. Like maybe these were all of type bool. And then maybe when I create my new request right here, I had a very specific order. I wanted to say specifically true, 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 and then false. Well, if I now flip the order of these, let's do it right now, just to give you a very clear example. If I now moved recipient, or excuse me, if I move complete down to the bottom, like so, I'm not going to get an error message. So I do not get an error message because there's no issues with the types that are being assigned here. However, you can see that false will now be assigned to a different property than it was assigned to before. So I know this is probably getting a little bit confusing, but please just take my word for it. I really encourage you to avoid using this syntax because it's just way too easy to run into a small issue. All right, so I'm going to clean this up, and then I'm going to go back up to the top and reorder the fields inside of my struct. So back up here, we have description of string. I should have just hit undo, but oh well, here we are. So I got a uint, an address, a bool, and that's it. So as you might imagine, when we use this key value approach right here, we can jumble the order all we want. So I can change that order and I get no additional error messages or anything like that. So now description is third and description is fourth. We get no, well now I get an error because I've got the dangling comma, but you get the idea. So I can't say it enough, highly recommend you use this key value syntax that you see right here, as opposed to that alternative, more shorthand way of defining a struct. But that's just my take. All right, so anyways, back to the struct itself. We define the struct, we assign it to new request, and then we push that into our array that holds a list of all of our different structs. So I think that probably makes sense at this point. However, we still have the error message right here, and it appears that the error is complaining about storage and something about memory. So let's take a pause right here. We're going to come back in the next video and talk about what this error message is complaining about. So I'll see you in just a minute.